Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. As always, Tom O'Connor from hurricanes are fading into the background down here in sunny New Orleans. And my partner in mischief, as our old friend Brownie Marion used to say, Rocky Messing, still in Tel Aviv. Still no prime minister.
So. No. Yep. No. We'll see. We got elections coming up here in 3 weeks, which I'll miss.
Oh, there you go. Nice. So. And we are very, very happy to be joined today by Casey Flaherty, who, if you don't recognize Casey, then you've been asleep for the last.
Where you been?
What have you been doing? I know it's football season, but come on, pay attention here. Casey, currently co-founder and chief strategy officer of Lex Fusion. Do I have that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, then that's the extent of that's it. I'm done. My work here is done.
We're out. That's it.
Casey, thanks so much for joining us. As we promised you, this is and as you can tell, this is a very informal sort of gathering. And we always start off with asking people, how did you get into this crazy world of ours? And by that, I mean the legal profession.
I was living in Beijing after college.
Oh, well,
and
of course.
SARS hit.
Oh,
COVID is not my first rodeo. And I did not get scared, but I did get bored. Seeing a city of 20 million become a ghost town essentially overnight was a bit eerie, but really it was just kind of dull. There was nothing to do. So I came back and went to law school because what else does a liberal arts major?
Well, wait a minute. That sort of begs the question. You just sort of casually said, "Well, after college, I was in Beijing."
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. What was the transition from college to Beijing?
So my father had been abroad a lot when he was younger. And I grew up without any money, and so I didn't have a chance to go anywhere. And so a big part of my decision-making process for where I would go to school is whether I'd get a scholarship and it would transfer to studying abroad. So I spent all of my sophomore year in Beijing, China, and all of my junior year in Bonn, Germany. I then went back to Beijing the summer after Germany, actually via the Trans-Manchurian Express, the 7-day train from Moscow to Beijing.
That's
nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
To work on my senior thesis. I graduated. One of my degrees was in Asian studies. I went back to live and work in Beijing, work on my Mandarin. And during that period is when SARS hit.
Right. So what school was that? What program was that?
So undergrad, I went to Loyola Marymount, and I did a few different language programs in Beijing while I was there, but the main one would be the foreign language university, and worked a lot of odd jobs while I was there. I was on a TV show that taught English. I wrote for the English language magazine, and probably most odd of the jobs is this is when Chinese players were starting to make it to the NBA. People remember Yao Ming, but even before him, there was Wang Zhizhi. I actually wrote who I wrote a cover story on. And the NFL saw that and they wanted to crack into the Chinese market. So the NFL set up a program to teach American football to Chinese middle schoolers. And so I was teaching American football to Chinese middle schoolers when SARS hit.
That is so cool.
As one of my odd jobs.
And you became the best known blocking back in all of Beijing, I'm sure.
they were in fifth grade. I wasn't playing against them.
Even better.
So he was only the third best, actually.
Yeah, right. So you're making me jealous because years and years ago, I did my undergraduate at Hopkins, and I entered the SICE program, the School of Advanced International Studies, and I wanted to do Eastern Studies. And after a year, I found out two things. One, they didn't have any Eastern Studies in the SICE at that time. It was a funnel for the diplomatic corps and basically in Europe or South America. Second, I then also found at the same time that I had absolutely no capacity to speak another language, a language other than English. And so that even if they had a program.
English is iffy.
My English was bad enough.
Yeah.
Trying to learn at that point, since I failed miserably at Spanish, Italian, German, and French, I don't think the career path was pointing me towards learning Chinese. Mandarin.
Well,
that was not going to happen.
That was my father's joke when I told him I was going to study Chinese. He could speak 7 languages and read and read 13. And he said, why would you want to learn another language? You're not even good at English.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
hold on. So you're hanging out in China. You're doing all these cool odd jobs. I do have a question in regards to: is the TV show available somewhere online that we can find?
Yeah, really. Can we see that anywhere? On YouTube?
I doubt it. And I was not a star. They would just do different scenes, and I would be brought in to do random scenes. I was
order a coffee or something.
Yeah. It's like I'm just one of the white people they would call. Like there was
wrong language, I know, but you're just another gaijin.
Right. Yeah, although frankly, the one that you'd want to find is they were another time they were filming a mini series that was taking place during shortly after the Cultural Revolution was when it was set, and they brought in American ping pong players to just get destroyed by the Chinese ping pong players.
Right.
Okay.
There was a huge crowd of Chinese people cheering on the Chinese people destroying the Americans, and I didn't play the American ping pong player. My friend did. I played the American ping pong coach.
There you go.
And let's just say the shorts that they gave me left very little to the imagination. In the style of 1960s and 70s.
Yeah, and the old Bob Weir's 1974 short shorts. Yeah,
PE coaches, and so that exists somewhere, and I hope it never sees the light of day.
Never makes it anywhere. So were you quarantined there, or and then got stuck, or were you able to leave pretty easily?
I was able to leave, no problem. I just needed something to do, and that something was law school.
Yeah.
And why law school? Like, what was the decision-making process?
Again, liberal arts major. My other degree was in humanities. I was pretty good at school. I was pretty good at school. And so what do you do when you are good at school and it's liberal arts and you're not and you have no idea what you want to do when you grow up? You either go and get and I got into advanced degree program for Asian studies at Stanford, but I decided to go to law school at USC instead, just because it seemed like a sure route to gainful employment.
Okay.
So mistakes were made.
So you go to law school, and then you went to go work at a firm, correct?
Yeah, I did complex commercial litigation at Holland and Knight.
Okay, very cool. And at that point in time, again, liberal arts and law school, any technology bend, or like were you were you a geek as a kid in one of the nerds going and spending time on technology and computers, or did that come just through the job and later?
It came through the job and later. So right as I started Holland and Knight, I started in September. In October, I was T-boned at 70 miles per hour on the freeway.
Oh,
And that someone lost control and just wiped me out. And I then suffered from pretty horrendous whiplash for over 5 years. You'll see I'm at a standing desk.
Mhm.
That was one of the dozens upon dozens of interventions that were part of me trying to deal with this whiplash. And I was on oxy and muscle relaxers and all of it. And it was this very vicious cycle of the longer I worked, the more pain I was in, the slower I worked, the longer I worked. And I worked a lot. I second chaired an arbitration 7 months in. And I was I broke through every kind of hours barrier there was in terms of bonuses, etc. And so because of the pain, I became obsessed not with technology but with productivity.
Okay.
And so I tend to think in terms of productivity,
yeah.
and technology being an essential tool,
Right,
to
a path
achieving
towards
productivity. So technology in and of itself doesn't interest me, although now I have more of an appreciation for it. But what can it actually do to increase productivity, to increase leverage?
So at the firm, what types of things were you getting into specifically that you saw were able to increase your productivity?
So it's from the most mundane possible, which is putting together binders. Yeah, multiple copies of lots and lots of binders for various depositions, arbitrations, trials, etc. That was still not the earliest days of e-discovery, but early enough that people were still charging by the page, that it was still copy shop pricing, and people were using law, and they were really excited about technology breakthroughs like summation, and so it was low labor intensive, low value added tasks, and then starting to wrestle with not even big data. I would just say bigger data than bankers' boxes could handle.
Right.
Yeah.
So cool. So you started looking at all these different tools, things that could help you to just get through your day, and how long were you at the firm?
2006, 2011.
Okay. And then where'd you go from there?
Then I moved in-house at Kia Motors.
At Kia. Okay. Very cool. So what brought about that decision? Just the right opportunity, the right time, or
well, this happened with both my sons, but for that, my first son was born dangerously premature, and we spent 8 weeks premature, and we spent 6 weeks in the NICU, including a surgery. And given the way I was working, just the hours, I made a decision that I wanted to be home more and to spend more time with him. Right. And going in-house seemed to be a route to that. Also, I had become very obsessed with productivity, and it did not seem like I was in any position to get the firm to do anything differently. And I thought if I was the client, I would be in a position to change the way that legal services were being delivered.
And you got
Right.
kind
I
of
was
known for that at that point, right? That's when you first came up with your, I'll call it the scorecard.
Yeah, so when I moved in house at Kia, I really was focused on changing the way that I worked with outside counsel. So as an associate, there are many things that I hated, but outside counsel guidelines is certainly near the top of things I hated the most, and I thought to be the most useless. But I understood why clients were attracted to them. I understood what they were trying to accomplish. I just didn't think that outside counsel guidelines were effective in serving that end of changing how work gets done. You know, we're obsessed with rates and discounts, but rates are not price. And in fact, in the equation that ends up being price, hours are much more susceptible to movement in one large direction or the other, right? They can go up by orders of magnitude or down by orders of magnitude, whereas rates tend to move in a relatively narrow band, which isn't to say they don't matter. It's just to say that I think we over-index on the wrong thing, and we'll leave the AFA discussion for another time. But,
Yeah.
But even with AFAs, I'm very interested in how work gets done and also how we improve how work gets done. And so to get away from the ineffective but annoying outside counsel guidelines, I decided to apply a bit of that. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, whatever that means. Apply some of that methodology, which starts with go to Gemba, the place it is, like go and actually understand what it is people do and how they do it, and be respectful, ask why a lot. And so I would take our billing data when it was an existing firm, and then later I would interview other firms who weren't doing our work, but started with our existing firms, analyze the billing data, who is doing what are they spending their time on, and then the people who were spending the most time on our work tended to be associates, and I would go and I would sit with them and just ask them to show me how they were doing specific things, so I could understand what the flow was,
Right.
For that kind of work, again, for which we were being billed.
Right.
And I would then go in and talk to the relationship partner. And again, at this point, I'm the client, right? All my jokes are funny. All my ideas are brilliant. Right, because I'm the client. And so they were always very nice. And it was, we failed your audit. And at the time I called it an audit, I stopped calling it that because it freaks everybody out. But they said, we failed. It's those idiots in IT who don't give us what we need to do the work the right way. But don't worry, we have a solution. We're going to form a technology committee of partners.
There you go.
Okay.
And I would not comment on the technology committee of partners piece, just because it would have been pointless. But I would say, I don't want to discourage you from investing more into your tech stack. One of the annoying things about technology, it's also the exciting things, is that it's always getting better. And so you could have the state of the art in every respect today. 6 months from now, you would be 6 months behind.
Yeah.
There is no finish line. So right. I am never, ever going to discourage you from investing in new platforms and new tooling. But your people can't even use the technology they already have. And they'd say, like what? It's like Word. And there, even though I was the client, they would push back and say, come on, Word, we hire very young, very smart, very young, very hardworking very young people.
Right.
They know how to use Word.
Of
They must know
course.
good technology, right? Yeah.
And I'm
Right.
like, well, no, they don't. And they're, you know, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So I actually came up with work that we were paying for, a workflow that I put together that involved Word, Excel, and PDF. And it was a test. And I had dummy documents, and I would give them to the associates with specific instructions of outcomes. Here's the things that you need to accomplish.
Mhm.
And the average AmLaw associate took 2.5 hours on work that I could complete in under 20 minutes, all using basic native functionality to the core tools of our trade. And that's what ended up getting me some notoriety, and I became the Word guy. And that's where my name got made. And in many respects, I believe that more today than I ever have. In fact, I have more data on this than anyone. I've tested over 50,000 people at this point.
Wow.
But I also don't want to pretend like that's everything. It's a thing, and it's
Right.
a fixable problem. And because
Right.
it's a fixable problem, I would like it to be fixed.
And it's a
But
signal. It's a great signal to show whether or not someone's actually thinking from a productivity mindset. Like it's the, am I locked in, or am I actually trying to make use of the tools in the best way possible? So that's cool.
But are you finding that, you know, the skill aside, I was always fascinated by your focus on workflow, which it seemed to me was always ignored. You know, everybody's workflow was different, sometimes in magnitudes of scale that were enormous. Has that changed at all in your view? Are people paying more attention to workflow, getting better at it?
so more, yes. Sufficient, no. So you can certainly, there are certainly examples of people paying far more attention to it, and that's great. It's much more familiar than it used to be, but it still does not get the attention that it should. We still subscribe to what I've written about, the lawyer theory of value, which is that value is delivered by smart lawyers doing smart lawyering, and that as problems grow, what you really need is more smart lawyers to handle the work. And that mindset is pervasive. And it starts, by the way, not just with in-house counsel, but the way that the corporations think about in-house counsel when they start their law departments. It flows all the way up, and that is still the primary way that we think about the delivery of legal services, and that to me is at the core of our challenges. That doesn't mean there aren't exceptions.
Yeah.
And it almost it's funny because I know many of the exceptions, if not most of them, and I'll get into these conversations, not with you obviously, but someone will say, yeah, but what about, just because you're here, Rahi, what about Jason Barnwell at Microsoft?
Right.
And I'll say, what about him? Like, I'll text him right now and he'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you. Like just because Jason thinks differently and has a platform to speak about it differently doesn't mean that he sees the overall operation of our market and most of the way that our work gets done the exact same way that I do. And there are certainly Jasons out there, and there are things that people like him have done that give us the illusion of innovation. At the very least, people like him are doing real things. Unfortunately, there is a deeper illusion that all the discussion of innovation means that way more is happening than it actually is. And I say that as someone who's bullish on it. And not just bullish, I consider it inevitable. Now, whether I'm still alive is by the time it happens is a totally different question. Part of getting timing right is part of being right, but
it's also, a lot of it comes down to you can't have innovation without people speaking about it. Meaning you need those people out there who are, are the spokespeople that people can look up to say, hey, what are you actually doing, and how is this going to make life better? But I think a lot of people look at you as one of those types of people who, like, if I can model my practice, my career, whatever it is, or my department after what you've done, maybe it's not the exact right thing for me and for my team and my department, but at least it gives them a starting point, which otherwise they won't even know where to start. And that's part of what needs to happen in general in the industry.
But I was about to make a joke about my ex-wife. You have no idea how disappointed people are when they meet me. Well, not meet me, but get a chance to pick my brain. So I'll get up on stage and I'll do my song and dance, and it's fairly polished, and very at least to them, it seems well reasoned and lots of data. And because of that, I strike people as someone who really knows what they're talking about. We can debate whether or not I do, but I think we can agree that there's a decent sized population that has the impression that I know what I'm talking about. And they hear me use this vocabulary that's new to them, that they find very exciting, like embedded advisory, compliance by design, integrated law, scalability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Positronic thrusters.
And all of these terms actually have meanings, and all of them are in fact important. But when we start to dig into them, people start to recognize just how much work it would take. So they think because
terrifies them.
because I can describe something quickly, that means it can happen quickly.
Right.
And and frankly, I've found that it doesn't matter how many times I include a big slide. It's easier said than done.
Right.
I have a Christian Bale meme where he says, "Sorry to disappoint," where I expressly say, if you think I have easy answers for you, I do not.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk to you about doing the hard things well, but that doesn't make them easier.
Right.
That doesn't make them less hard. Yeah.
Yeah. It could certainly save you from wasting time going down the wrong path. It can help you reframe the way you approach particular problems. It's not as if there's no value in it, but none of that value is going to be a shortcut.
Yep.
Right. But if it saves them a little bit of time and keeps them away from some of the mistakes, then again, there's value.
There is, but that's not the value that people want.
Wrong. No, they want the solution that they can just plug and play and move on with their lives and say, hey, I implemented something great.
Yeah. Make it so.
Okay, so you finish your time at Kia, and then you've pretty much been on the consulting side since then, correct?
Well, startup
Is that-
/ consulting. So I mentioned having tested 50,000 people. So one of the things that happened is when I got notoriety for testing outside counsel, other law departments said, "Oh, we want to do that." And I'd say, "Great." And I'd send them all of my materials with
Okay.
with exactly how I did it. But it really did involve me sitting down with human beings and watching them work.
Yeah.
And talking to them and spending real time to unpack how legal services were being delivered. And so when I was still in-house, the other in-house department said, "Oh, we don't have time for that. If we could just have a score,
Right.
we would totally make outside counsel do it." And so I thought, oh, there's my $1 million idea. And so I started a company that automated that assessment that I built. And then in-house counsel said, "Oh, just kidding. We're really locked in talking to our law firms about discounts, and we don't feel like we can ask them that." And so then that company pivoted and added training on top of the assessment. So now it's competency-based training, where people go through it and if they know something, they just do it, and if they don't know something, then they're taught to do it, but then they actually have to demonstrate that they can do it. So it's experiential, competency-based. Have issued almost 30,000 micro certifications to people on Word, Excel, PDF, but built that company over the last 7 years, and funded it first through consulting, first solo, primarily to large law departments, but also some law firms. Like Jason Barnwell hired me at Microsoft because I wrote a book on the broader concept of working with outside counsel on legal service delivery, and he read that book and decided to make it his framework for approaching outside counsel, and then hired me to help him realize that vision.
Structure that, yeah.
And that, by the way, that's all public. I don't just drop names and
throw out names. Yeah, exactly.
So I did a fair amount. I helped large companies set up their legal operations department, to set up outside counsel management programs. A lot of them sent me on site at their law firms to do exactly what I wrote about in the book. So I went on site to over 70 law firms to unpack how they were delivering services to specific clients. So most of my work was for law departments, but some was for law firms. One of those law firms, Baker McKenzie, who brought me in to build out the world's largest legal project management team, which I did. It's a great experience. I was actually just texting with my successor this morning. He lives in London, but he's in Sydney right now on his way to Singapore for the annual meeting. The team is doing fantastic. So happy to be a part of that. And when I was done with that build, that's when I came out and joined my co-founders in Lex Fusion.
So let's talk for a minute or two about Lex Fusion and what you're up to now.
I wish I could do it in a minute. One of the many things I have failed to do is find an elevator pitch that's actually satisfying. So we are the ultimate bottom feeders in that we are vendors to vendors. We work with legal innovation companies, both technology and services, on their go-to-market strategy, on their product strategy, and so we consult to them, and that's how we get paid. And so from a distance, it looks like the economic model is outside sales, and in many respects, it kind of is, but that's not how the customers experience us, which is what. So, and that's what makes this so hard to encapsulate.
Quantify, yeah.
In order to provide the right kind of feedback to our members, the legal innovation companies who pay us, we need to know what the market wants. That is market listening. And the only way to do real market listening is to listen. And so instead of going into calls with a sales agenda, I go into calls with a learning agenda, and I just talk to people about whatever it is they want to talk about. What problems are you trying to solve? And the value exchange is they tell me what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it, and I will help them the same way I used to when I was consulting, in that I will try and point them in the right direction. And this is for free. The thing is, I'll only do a limited amount of it. So I'll talk to them for an hour, 5 hours, 10 hours. But as we discussed, everything devolves into hard work eventually. I'm not going to be there to do the hard work. I'm not going to be there for the 50 hours or 500 hours it takes to do an implementation or set up a program,
whatever it is. Yep.
But this includes adding value, again, is helping them find problem solution fit. And that includes talking about tech that isn't sold by the companies who pay us, because they're fantastic and proud to have them as part of the collective, but they don't solve every single problem. They don't cover every single category, and I don't force the conversations in that direction. And so it's really important for me to have a broad view of what's going on in the market, so that I can add value in those interactions. And a big part of it is what other people are doing from a composite perspective. Like one of the reasons that everybody talks to us is everybody talks to us. Right. And one of the greatest services I can provide tends to be connecting peers to each other. So I connect people to whatever is going to be valuable to them. And sometimes it's a peer who's just 6 months ahead of them working a particular problem. Now, one of the nicest emails I ever got was someone who just, they had already selected a tool in a particular category. And by the way, it's a category where we have a member, and they'd selected someone else. I didn't try and change their mind. They'd already made their selection. Instead, I connected them to someone I knew who had just finished implementing that same tool. And one of their peers. And so the email said, "Thank you so much." They told me their top 10 mistakes, and I was definitely going to make at least 6 of them.
Wow.
And now I'm not.
Right. And it's amazing. In general terms, people are willing to help out. Even
absolutely.
Competitors, even different firms, different service providers, whatever it is. But you just got to make that connection, right? You got to get people talking. And again, it's how the industry will continue to grow. The more that we can get people talking together, the more educated they become, and the better consumers they are at whatever it is that they're trying to actually use. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I can understand why the elevator pitch on this would be a little difficult to really get that down into that 15 seconds. It can be tough. So
well, yeah. So the 15 seconds is we exist to accelerate legal innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And we really do that, but to understand how we do that takes longer than 15 seconds.
That's a little trickier.
But that said, we don't do any cold calls. And so we have pretty extensive Rolodexes, and they keep growing, but they grow through warm introductions. And so we typically don't have to spend a lot of time credentialing ourselves. Where I run into that, justify your existence is where I know someone within an organization, and then they say, "Oh, you really need to talk to so and so in the organization," and that person doesn't know me,
right?
at all.
So it's still a warm intro, but it's still
But it's
fresh. Right.
it's not the same, because when peers are introducing us, they tend to know that the peer is trying to solve this problem. Oftentimes people bring me in because they want to convince someone that there's a problem to be solved.
Right. Which is a much harder problem to
Yeah.
start with. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Well, we unfortunately we're heading towards the end line here. So if you don't mind, we've got a couple of random quick questions we're going to run you through that have nothing to do with work necessarily, but just to get a little sense of you, and then Tom will take us out with a final question or two and some thoughts. But let's start with this. So obviously, you grew up with that desire to travel. Where's your favorite place to travel in the world?
Wherever I'm going next.
Ooh.
So my next trip, my next big trip is to Tokyo.
Okay.
But that's the great thing about travel, is the unexplored country. Like what haven't you done yet? And I feel the same way when people ask my favorite food. My favorite thing about food is the variety, and that I continue to find new things that are exciting, that I never would have occurred to me. So I really do have a novelty bias.
Okay.
And I know you asked me a simple question, and I gave you a non-simple answer.
It's a great answer, and it feeds into the next simple question, which is,
oh, nice pun. I see what you did there.
yes. Yeah. What's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
The beating heart of a cobra.
Ooh, nice.
Ooh. In what
I think
country?
that's a winner in that category. I don't think anybody can beat that.
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Okay. Very cool. Did you like it?
So I guess we're going to argue about whether it's eaten or not. That's something that you shoot. So it gets dropped in a glass of alcohol and you shoot it. And it's very strong rice whiskey. It's about 100 proof. It much closer to the Chinese baijiu than the Japanese sake. And so no, it tastes like rocket fuel. But then they do prepare the rest of the cobra as your meal, various dishes, and it was quite good.
They extract the heart in front of you?
They do.
Cool. So there you get a show.
So they extract the heart and drop it in the glass of who's ever been selected or is stupid enough to volunteer.
Right.
And then they also remove the liver and squeeze the bile into the carafe of alcohol,
of the rice alcohol.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Last one on my side. If you could give yourself one quick piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Professionally?
Your call.
That's your call. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know, just because I always think in terms of path dependent, right? And if I knew then what I know now, I would end up in a very different place.
I wouldn't be talking to you two both.
I'd be a completely different person. Frankly, I think it would be to understand much sooner what problems it is we're solving. So I was often solving the problems of legal productivity, and still do, but I was not contextualizing it in terms of business productivity. which is the ultimate end game.
Right.
How do we drive better business outcomes, faster? And
Okay.
I used to think that whether it was $175 an hour or $500 an hour, or now it's $1,200 or $2,000 was a lot of money, or or $100 million legal budget was a lot of money, because it is a lot of money to me personally. It would be,
Right.
but when you think at the actual scale of business, much of what we're doing in legal isn't even a rounding error.
Right.
And that's not to say it isn't real money and it's not material, but savings on legal as an end in itself is an absurdity.
Right. Coming in and saving $2 million is not going to necessarily.
Well, I mean, very small companies, yes,
Sure.
but
right.
But when we think about, at $6 billion, you're just cracking the Fortune 500 in the US. And the average company, $6 billion or more, 0.16% of revenue goes to legal spend. Right. So if you're gonna save 20% on your outside counsel spend, well, that's only 44% of that 0.16, and it's 20% of that, and it ends up being 0.015% of revenue. By the way, it's still not nothing in terms of raw dollars.
It matters, but
as an end in itself, it's trivial. Right. Yeah, it's not. Let's find a way to give that money back to the corporation. It's let's make sure that we are exercising cost discipline, which is essential business hygiene, and optimizing our spend to meet the needs of the business at scale and pace. And I used to get very caught up in all those small numbers and not focus on the big picture. And it took me a long time to broaden my view. And I wish I had that broader view earlier, because I still actually agree with many of the approaches that I've taken, but I was not contextualizing them properly, and my thinking has definitely changed in a lot of respects as I've taken on that broader view.
Cool, good answer. And I don't think we'd mess up the space-time continuum with that one. So
no,
yeah.
Great.
Okay, Tom, take us out.
One quick question along the same line of Rockies, but this is an easy one. Beatles or Stones?
Stones.
There we go. I like you for a reason.
I just saw them last November here in Austin.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And probably the best produced show I've ever been to.
Yes.
And that personal experience, that, creating that memory, as great as the Beatles are, and they are a great band, it's just different, not just in degree, but in kind.
No, the Stones have obviously it took them 60 years to get there, and a lot of heartache and a few deaths and yada yada yada, but in terms of production, you're absolutely right. First, they're playing better than they ever have. They're clearly masters of their craft musically, and I think sobriety in several cases has something to do with that. But the production itself, the use of technology in a really transparent manner, so that you don't really realize how you look at the sound stage out in the back of the auditorium. It looks like the cockpit of an F-15. There's actually more like a 757er. There's three guys back there moves, and the technology in the production values are absolutely astounding. And the sound that they can adjust from one giant arena to another. I saw them in the dome here, Charlie's last rodeo, and a place where we go in with expectations of horrible sound, because it's just you know, it's a black hole, and they sounded tremendous. It was unbelievable. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's a great
Three-
comment about production value.
Three quick comments on Stones. One, that I was there for our mutual friend Amanda Tillman's birthday, so credit goes to her for being
Great.
born and having good taste. Two, I mentioned my earlier my son being in neonatal intensive care. He was
Yeah.
at Cedar Sinai, and friends of ours came to take us out to sushi. And if you know where Cedar Sinai in LA is located, very upscale area, very famous sushi restaurant right next door. Sitting there, a little out of it for obvious reasons, and out of the corner of my eye, a very tall woman and a very short man walk in, and I look over. I'm like, all right, what's this guy's deal going to be? And it's Mick Jagger, which I'm like, oh, and Jerry,
Right.
and just, oh yeah, and then finally, and I think this is a great way to end. So yes, the technology, amazing, but the most amazing thing is the passion. They love it.
Yeah.
They have they have more money and more fame and more anything than you could want in 1,000 lifetimes.
Yep.
They're doing it solely because they love it.
Yep.
And that comes through.
Yep.
Yeah,
in
it's very
every
evident.
little
Yep.
piece of it. And that was the most transfixing part. Their talent,
Yeah.
yes. Production values, yes. But
They love playing the
they only
music.
augmented what
Yep.
is true passion. And
Yep.
I think that's what keeps many of us going. Otherwise, we wouldn't have just spent an hour discussing legal tech.
Talking about it, yeah. So quick last question, our wrap-up question always. If you could spend a day with somebody from our profession, living or dead, doesn't have to be someone you've actually ever met before, who would that person be and what would you do with them?
I would spend a day with Browning Marion, who I did have the privilege of meeting a few times. And one of those times I was with my also late father after my mother had passed. And he just came down with me to a conference where both Browning and I were speaking. And we ran into Browning at a pub, which my father and I were known to frequent together. And he could not have been more gracious to my father, who, long retired, no interest in legal, no interest in e-discovery, legal tech, any of it.
Yeah, any of it, yeah.
And the same way I talked about the Stones and the evidence of their passion, Browning, the evidence of his kindness was such that you just want to be around people like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He was a great friend of mine, and I miss him terribly. Well, Casey, thanks so much for taking your time and being so generous of it. Always a pleasure to talk to you. As you know, I'm sure you could tell Rocky and I could keep doing this for hours.
Yep. Always a pleasure. And
it was.
Let's
Go ahead.
Let's figure out a set something up in New Orleans. Give me an excuse to go.
Well, you're the third or fourth person who said that. You said that to me earlier, and we're trying to figure out some way to do that for next year. We're talking to a couple of other people, and let's do something in New Orleans. We'll go back to Tubes Meadery and have another.
Oh yes. I still have the bottle from that night on my shelf on display.
Great place.
One of my favorite meals of all time.
Great meal in a nice little neighborhood place. Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Great company too.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm always at your service.
Thanks, Casey.
Bye. See you all again on the e-Discovery channel.